She pretended to be asleep. What happened afterward made her cry for the rest of the night. The elevator doors slid open on the 52nd floor at exactly 11 p.m., and Daniel Reyes stepped out wearing his worn, stained work jacket. He was holding his young daughter's tiny hand, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He was never meant to be there. Daniel worked as a janitor on the overnight cleaning crew, and the woman sitting perfectly still behind the glass-walled office, her eyes closed and her head resting gently against one hand, was Elena Whitfield, the billionaire who owned the entire building. What Daniel didn't know was that she wasn't truly asleep. Through slightly opened eyelashes, she was quietly watching him, testing something she had been wondering about for weeks. She wanted to know if genuine kindness still existed in a world that had convinced her it no longer did. If you believe in second chances, quiet acts of kindness, and stories that remind us what truly matters, hit the like button, leave a comment below, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because what you're about to witness will remind you exactly why stories like this deserve to be told. Daniel never planned to bring his 6-year-old daughter Mia with him to work that evening, but his babysitter had canceled at the last minute. He had no relatives nearby, no friends available to help, and no other options. Missing that shift meant falling behind on rent, and that simply wasn't something he could afford. So he helped Mia put on her favorite gray dress, placed her well-loved teddy bear into her arms, and gently reminded her to stay quiet, stay close, and follow him while he cleaned the executive floor. He had been working this job for 8 months, ever since the factory where he had spent 10 loyal years suddenly shut down. One day he had steady work. The next day he walked out carrying nothing except a layoff notice and the heavy responsibility of raising a daughter who depended on him for absolutely everything. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier. Since that heartbreaking day, life had become a constant struggle for the two of them. Daniel worked 2 different jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Mia often finished her homework in waiting rooms, break rooms, empty hallways, and sometimes even on the backseat of city buses while her father finished another shift. Neither of them complained very much. They simply kept moving forward, one day at a time. When Daniel carefully pushed his cleaning cart into the executive office that night, he immediately stopped in his tracks. A woman wearing an elegant ivory-colored suit sat slumped in a large leather chair behind the massive desk. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow and steady. She looked completely worn out, as though the weight of the entire day had finally caught up with her after hours of making decisions that probably affected thousands of people. Daniel recognized her at once. He had seen her smiling face countless times on the framed magazine cover displayed near the elevator. Elena Whitfield, Chief Executive Officer, owner of the entire tower. A woman whose wealth was greater than anything Daniel could even begin to imagine. For a brief moment, he thought about quietly backing out of the room without cleaning it. He didn't want to disturb her. He certainly didn't want to risk waking someone so important. But then he noticed something else. The office felt unusually cold. The air conditioner continued humming without pause, filling the room with a constant stream of chilly air. Elena had no blanket wrapped around her, no sweater, no coat, nothing at all to keep her warm while she rested. Daniel stood there for a second. Without even realizing it, his thoughts drifted to Mia. How many nights had he quietly walked into her room after she had fallen asleep just to pull the blanket back over her shoulders? How many mornings had he found her curled into a tiny ball because the blanket had slipped away during the night? He had never counted. He simply did it. Not because anyone asked him to. Not because anyone would notice. But because love often shows itself in the smallest actions. And in that moment, he didn't see a billionaire sitting in the chair. He simply saw another tired human being who looked cold. Kindness, he believed, wasn't supposed to depend on someone's bank account or job title. It was simply the right thing to do. Without making a sound, Daniel slowly removed his own work jacket. The sleeves were worn, the cuffs were beginning to fray, The company logo stitched onto the front had faded after years of washing. It wasn't expensive. In fact, it was the only warm outer layer he owned. Still, he carefully stepped closer and gently placed it across Elena's shoulders. He made sure not to wake her. He adjusted the jacket carefully so it covered her arms and protected her from the cold air. Every movement was slow and respectful. From the doorway, little Mia stood hugging her teddy bear tightly against her chest. Her wide eyes followed every movement her father made. Children often understand that something important is happening long before they understand the reason behind it. She didn't ask questions. She simply watched in complete silence. Daniel smiled softly at his daughter before quietly returning to his work. He vacuumed the carpet along the corners of the office. He emptied the small trash bin beside the desk. He dusted the bookshelves. He wiped fingerprints from the glass table. Every task was completed with the same quiet care he gave every night. He never expected anyone to notice. He certainly wasn't hoping for praise. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He believed kindness only counted when no one was watching. What Daniel didn't realize was that Elena Whitfield hadn't been asleep for even a single second. Her eyes had remained closed on purpose. For weeks, a question had been quietly bothering her. She had built one of the largest business empires in the country. She had earned respect. She had accumulated unimaginable wealth. She had received awards, recognition, and endless praise from magazines and television interviews. Yet somewhere along the way, she had started wondering if genuine compassion still existed without conditions attached. Too many people had smiled only when they wanted something. Too many conversations ended with hidden requests. Too many compliments came with expectations. She had begun to question whether simple, selfless kindness had disappeared completely. So that evening, after another exhausting day filled with meetings, contracts, investors, and impossible decisions, she chose to remain perfectly still when the cleaning crew arrived. She wanted to observe. She wanted to see what someone would do if they believed no reward, no recognition, and no consequences were waiting for them. She expected people to quietly clean around her and leave. She expected someone might complain under their breath about having to work around a sleeping executive. She expected indifference. Instead, she felt something unexpected. A worn jacket, warm, carefully placed over her shoulders with the same tenderness someone might show a close family member. No hesitation, no performance, no audience, just simple human kindness. At that very moment, Elena felt tears gathering behind her closed eyes, not because of the jacket itself, but because of what it represented. For the first time in a very long time, someone had treated her like a person instead of a powerful billionaire. Daniel had no idea who she truly was beyond the magazine cover. He didn't expect a promotion. He didn't expect money. He didn't even expect her to remember his face. He simply saw another human being who looked cold and decided to help. That quiet act touched Elena more deeply than any expensive gift or carefully prepared speech ever had. She kept pretending to sleep because she didn't trust herself to open her eyes without crying. And as Daniel continued cleaning quietly across the room with his little daughter patiently waiting by the door, Elena realized that the answer she had been searching for over the past several weeks had finally arrived. Kindness had not disappeared. It had simply become much harder to find. But standing only a few feet away from her was living proof that it still existed after her last engagement fell apart because of betrayal, when a fiancé had only been interested in her family name and the money in her bank account, and after seeing coworker after coworker smile warmly in front of her while secretly working against her behind closed doors, she had slowly begun to question whether anyone in this world still chose to do the right thing simply because it was the right thing to do, with nothing to gain in return. She had heard quiet stories about the humble janitor who worked the night shift, the single father raising his little daughter on his own, and something deep inside her wanted just once to witness what a person would do when they truly believed no one was watching, and there was absolutely no reward waiting for an act of kindness. What he did changed something inside her heart. As the gentle warmth of his jacket rested across her shoulders, she stayed completely still. She listened as he quietly returned to his cleaning cart and continued with his work without saying another word. He did not pause to see if anyone noticed. He did not linger hoping for thanks. He did not take out his phone to capture the moment or send a message to anyone. He did not expect praise, attention, or recognition. He simply went back to work as though what he had done was the most natural thing in the world. As she listened to the soft sound of his footsteps fade into the hallway, she felt tears gathering behind her closed eyes. She had spent so many years surrounded by people who acted as if they cared while hiding selfish motives beneath carefully chosen smiles. Every compliment had come with conditions. Every friendly conversation had seemed connected to business, money, influence, or personal gain. She had almost forgotten what true kindness looked like. And now, standing in complete silence, she had just witnessed a man who owned very little willingly give away the only source of warmth he had with him that night. He expected nothing in return. Not money, not praise, not even a simple thank you. She kept her eyes shut until Daniel and Mia quietly left the office. She listened to the gentle squeak of the wheels on his cleaning cart as they rolled farther and farther down the hallway until the sound finally disappeared. Only then did she slowly sit upright. She wrapped both hands tightly around the jacket resting on her shoulders, pulled it close against herself, and finally allowed all the emotions she had been holding back for years to come rushing out. The tears that followed were not soft or graceful. They came from somewhere much deeper. They came from a place inside her that had been exhausted for years. They came from the lonely part of her heart that had slowly stopped believing that truly good people still existed. They came from years of disappointment, broken trust, false friendships, and relationships built on selfish intentions instead of genuine care. She cried without trying to stop herself. The empty office remained silent except for the quiet sound of her breathing and the tears falling down her face. Nearly an hour passed before she finally found the strength to stand. Throughout that entire time, Daniel's jacket stayed wrapped around her shoulders like the first real feeling of comfort she had experienced in many years. For the first time in what felt like forever, she did not feel alone. The next morning, Elena made a decision that surprised everyone around her. Instead of beginning her day with meetings, financial reports, or investment calls, she asked her assistant to quietly locate Daniel's employee file. It was not because she wanted to investigate him. It was not because she believed there was something suspicious about him. She simply wanted to understand the man who had shown her more honesty in a single quiet moment than most people had shown throughout her entire career. As she carefully read through the information, she slowly learned pieces of Daniel's life that he had never shared with anyone. She learned about the heartbreaking loss of his wife. She discovered how the factory where he had once worked had permanently closed, forcing him to rebuild his life from almost nothing. She saw the records showing that he worked 2 different jobs just to keep food on the table and pay rent. She learned about Mia, her school, her excellent grades, and how proud Daniel was of every small achievement she made. She also found something that touched her deeply. Hidden inside a simple employment questionnaire was a small section asking employees about future career goals. Most people had written promotions, higher salaries, or management positions. Daniel had written only one sentence. "One day I hope to open my own repair shop so I can provide a better future for my daughter." There was nothing complicated about his dream. It was small. It was honest. And it was completely focused on giving Mia a better life. Elena closed the file and sat quietly for several long minutes. She realized that Daniel had never once asked anyone for help. He had never complained. He had never expected the world to reward him for doing the right thing. He simply kept working every single day. Within a week, Elena quietly created a new position for Daniel inside her company's facilities management division. The promotion came with a salary that finally allowed him to breathe without constantly worrying about every bill. For the first time in years, he no longer needed 2 exhausting jobs just to survive. The position also included full health insurance, making sure Mia would always receive the medical care she needed without Daniel lying awake at night worrying about the cost. Even more important, the schedule included flexible working hours. Instead of missing bedtime almost every evening, Daniel could finally be home with Mia. He could read her stories before she slept. He could help with homework. He could cook dinner with her. He could enjoy the ordinary moments that every loving parent deserves, but that life had taken away from him for far too long. When Daniel received the offer, he could hardly believe it. He thanked everyone involved, assuming his years of hard work had finally been noticed. He never realized the real reason behind it. Elena never told him. She never mentioned that one cold evening. She never spoke about the jacket. She never reminded him of the kindness he had shown her. She did not call reporters. She did not invite photographers. She did not post about it online. She did not hold a company ceremony. She wanted no public recognition at all. She simply wished to quietly return the same kindness Daniel had shown her without expecting anything in return. Months passed. Little by little, Daniel's life continued changing. With Elena's support and guidance, along with resources she quietly arranged behind the scenes, the dream he had carried for so many years slowly became real. The small repair shop he had imagined during countless late-night shifts finally opened its doors. It was not a huge business. It was not fancy. But it belonged to him. Every tool hanging on the wall represented years of sacrifice. Every customer who walked through the front door represented another step toward the future he had always wanted. One evening, after closing the shop, Daniel looked across the room and smiled. Mia sat comfortably at a real dining table inside their own cozy home, quietly finishing her homework. She was no longer waiting for him inside cold break rooms while he worked overtime. She was no longer spending evenings on buses traveling between his jobs. She had her own space, her own room, her own desk, a safe place where she could simply be a child. Daniel watched her for a long moment, feeling thankful for everything life had unexpectedly given them. He still had no idea that one simple act of kindness had started it all. Meanwhile, sometimes late at night after another long day, Elena would sit quietly by the window in her apartment and think back to that unforgettable evening. She would remember the silent office. She would remember pretending to be asleep. She would remember the gentle weight of Daniel's old jacket resting across her shoulders. Most of all, she would remember the quiet man who had absolutely no idea that his small act of compassion had slowly melted the frozen walls surrounding a billionaire's heart. Without speeches, without attention, without expecting anything in return. He had reminded her that kindness was still alive, not inside expensive boardrooms, not in carefully planned public events, not through grand performances designed to impress others, but inside ordinary people. People who struggled every single day. People who had every reason to protect the little they owned. People who still chose generosity even when life had given them very little. Daniel never considered himself extraordinary. He believed he had simply done what any decent person would have done. But that single quiet decision reached farther than he could ever imagine. It changed 2 lives instead of 1. And perhaps that is how true kindness has always worked. The smallest acts often create the biggest changes. Sometimes one warm jacket becomes the beginning of a completely different future. Sometimes one silent moment of compassion restores another person's faith in humanity. Sometimes one choice made without expecting a reward becomes the reason someone else starts believing in goodness again. If this story touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to leave a comment below and share which part meant the most to you. Your thoughts, experiences, and kind words truly mean more than you may realize, and they help keep stories like this alive. And if you believe people like Daniel still exist in this world, quietly helping others without asking for recognition, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who could use a reminder that genuine kindness is still alive, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like this deserve to be shared again and again until people everywhere remember that even the smallest act of goodness can change a life forever.